What's my point? What's my point? What's my point? That just tells you the honesty and integrity of the church fathers. What about the book of Hebrews? As Dr. White just mentioned, some areas question Hebrews because they didn't know who the author was.
Do we know who wrote the book of Hebrews? No, we do not. Do we know who wrote the book of Hebrews? No, we do not.
They didn't know who the author was. They didn't know who the author was. And yet, Hebrews is rich when it comes to the work of Christ, the perfection of his work as high priest and sacrifice, as well as his deity. In fact, yesterday Dr. White mentioned Hebrews chapter 1, verses 10 to 12. A passage which identifies Jesus as Yahweh.
Yes.
Yahweh of Psalm 102. So now here's another book that's rich in affirming the deity of Christ, his perfect work as high priest and mediator, and yet there was some dispute regarding its canonicity. Some dispute regarding its canonicity. What's my point? This shows you the extreme care, integrity, and honesty of the early church fathers. They didn't just accept the book because it agreed with their theology. They had to be certain that this book had apostolicity. It either was written by an apostle or a companion of an apostle with an apostle's approval.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
They didn't know who the author was. They didn't know who the author was. It either was written by an apostle or a companion of an apostle with an apostle's approval. They didn't know who the author was. So that shows you the care and the process by which we get the New Testament. And I praise God for that, because you see the providence of God in using fallible men to give us his infallible word. You see?
Excellent
logic. We see the honesty, the integrity of the church fathers in being careful, not just to include anything, but to include only that which was God-breathed.
Book of Hebrews, which was accepted into the New Testament because church fathers thought Paul wrote it, but it doesn't claim to be written by Paul. So it's actually anonymous.
And being careful, not just to include anything, but to include only that which was God-breathed. Yeah.
You have no evidence of that.
My contention in this book that I've just written, Forged, is that in fact there are books of this sort in the New Testament, books that claim to be written by apostles that were not written by those apostles.
Absorb it. And being careful, not just to include anything, but to include only that which was God-breathed.
What you just said is from a historical perspective, absurd.
So that you've got 8 books, at least, that are certainly written in the names of the people who claimed as their authors. 8 others that are anonymous, that are probably falsely assigned to people.
Absorb it.
And you're left with 11 books that are what I'm calling forged.
Absorb it.
6 of Paul's letters, I include the book of Acts, 1st and 2nd Peter, James, and Jude, are not written by the people who are claimed as their authors. 11 books in the New Testament that are probably forged.
So that shows you the care and the process by which we get the New Testament. And
let me put this as bluntly as I can. You've been deceived. That's a lie.
Absorb it.
How can a book that supports truth be based on a lie? How is it that an author who tells people to be truthful with one another, as the author of Ephesians does, how can he say that you are to take up the shield of truth? How is it that truth is important to an author when he's lying about his own identity?
Absorb it.
Even if you are the most hardcore, Bible-believing evangelical on the planet, you surely think that God gave you a brain. Use your brain.
Absorb it, meditate on it, and then share it with others